He had inherited a throne that looked like gold only from a distance. Up close, it was a chair carved from debt, hunger, and fear. Sultan Kemal sat beneath the dome of the audience hall, while the chandeliers glittered and the courtiers bowed, yet the air itself tasted of copper, coins scraped too thin, promises stretched too far. Reports arrived like winter crows, granaries half empty in the eastern provinces, caravans robbed on roads that once belonged to the empire, sailors paid in debased silver that turned green in their palms, and a slow, simmering mutiny in the barracks, where the soldiers whispered that the new sultan was a scholar in silk, not a lion with claws. The divan, the council, met with solemn faces and gentle voices, but Kemal could feel the iron under their velvet. Grand Vizier Halim Pasha spoke of patience, of gradual reforms, of the delicate balance that kept the realm from tearing itself apart. The treasurer, Ferid Effendi, always arrived with neat ledgers and soft eyes, presenting numbers that looked clean as prayer water. Yet Kemal had been trained by his late tutor to mistrust numbers that were too smooth. Arithmetic, he had learned, could be a curtain as fine as any brocade. When he asked why the tax farms yielded less each season despite harsher collections, Halim Pasha answered with a sad smile, "The people are poor, my sultan. They cannot give what they do not have." When Kemal asked why the coastal customs suddenly declined, even as foreign ships clogged the harbor, Ferid Effendi offered a carefully folded explanation: storms, inefficiencies, unavoidable loss. And when Kemal pressed, the men in the chamber did what they always did when threatened. They invoked legitimacy. "Our enemies watch," Halim Pasha murmured, eyes drifting toward the carved inscription of the dynasty above the throne. Any shake to the treasury becomes a rumor. Any rumor becomes a banner. And banners. He let the sentence die, but Kemal felt its shape: civil war, because there was a name no one spoke aloud, and yet everyone carried like a blade beneath the tongue. The hidden heir, the problem, the infant prince said to be born in the last weeks of the old sultan's life, rumored to be the true continuation of the bloodline, rumored also to have vanished, dead, stolen, smuggled, depending on who whispered. If the child existed and was produced by the wrong faction at the right moment, the empire would split like dry wood. The Janissariagas would choose sides. The provincial beys would declare independence. Neighboring kings would fund whichever rebellion promised them ports and concessions. Kemal's reign, barely 2 years old, was a bridge built on fog. He could not simply arrest Halim Pasha or Ferid Effendi. The council had elevated him after the old sultan's death precisely because he was acceptable, educated, calm, unbloodied by faction. A compromise sultan. A safe sultan. A sultan they thought they could guide like a falcon on a leash. And Kemal, in his private chambers, would stare at the empire's map and feel something almost like rage, not at the people who cursed his name in the streets, but at the elegant trap laid around him. If he moved too fast, he would be called a tyrant. If he moved too slow, he would be called a fool. And if he moved against the council, they would lift the hidden heir like a torch and burn his palace down with legitimacy itself. The first time Kemal left the palace alone, he did it out of shame as much as strategy. He disguised himself in a plain cloak and a trader's cap, taking only one guard he trusted, Murad, a captain who had fought at the border and still spoke with the bluntness of a man who had seen blood dry on sand. "You will be killed," Murad said, when Kemal insisted. "Or worse, you will be seen," Kemal replied. "If I cannot walk my own streets, I do not deserve to rule them." They slipped through a servant's gate at dawn and entered the city as the markets woke, the alleys smelling of bread and ash, the sellers calling out spices and cloth. Kemal expected to find poverty. He did not expect to find it so organized, so deliberately arranged. Every stall owner paid someone. Every boatman offered a coin to a man with a stick. Every tax collector had a bodyguard who looked too well fed. The empire's suffering was not a natural disaster, it was a system. In the shadow of the coppersmiths, Kemal heard shouting, sharp, cruel, familiar in any language. A group of men surrounded a woman near a broken fountain, their voices full of entitlement. She held a basket of dried figs close to her chest like a shield, her shoulders stiff, her jaw set. A small boy, perhaps 4, clung to her skirts, eyes huge, lips pressed in the grim determination of children who learn early that crying is useless. One of the men, wearing the badge of a local tax agent, seized the woman's wrist. "You owe 3 months," he said, "and you owe interest, and you owe for the license to sell, and you owe for breathing the Sultan's air." The others laughed. The woman's face was bruised under her scarf, but her beauty struck Kemal like a sudden bell. Not the soft, ornamental kind that courtiers carried like jewelry, but a fierce beauty sharpened by survival, dark eyes that refused to lower, a mouth that had learned to speak only when words mattered. She tried to pull away, and the agent yanked harder, tipping her basket so figs rolled onto the dust. The little boy lunged to gather them, tiny hands frantic. "Please," the woman said, voice steady despite the tremor at its edge. "Take what you must, but do not touch my son." The tax agent leaned in, his breath sour. "Maybe I will take something else," he whispered, loud enough that his friends snickered. Kemal felt Murad's hand shift under his cloak, reaching for a blade. Kemal stepped forward first. "Let her go," he said, calm as a river that hides its depth. The men turned, surprised to see a stranger intervene. The agent's eyes flicked over Kemal's clothes, assessing. "Who are you?" he demanded. "A man who has had enough," Kemal answered, "and a man who can count." The agent scoffed. "Then count your teeth before I scatter them." Kemal's gaze slid to the badge on the agent's chest, then to the 2 thugs behind him, men with the posture of hired muscle, not officials. "Your badge is polished," Kemal observed, "but your hands are too clean for your work. You are not a collector. You are a thief wearing the empire like a costume." The agent's smile thinned. "Careful, stranger." Kemal took 1 step closer, close enough that the woman's eyes met his. She did not plead. She did not perform gratitude. She looked at him with a sharp, measuring focus, as if deciding whether he was another kind of danger. Kemal kept his voice even. "Release her, and I will forget I saw you. Touch her again, and I will make a story of you that will reach the palace walls." The word palace made the agent hesitate, only for a heartbeat, but it was enough. Murad moved like a shadow, appearing at Kemal's side with just enough menace to bend courage. The agent spat. "Fine, keep your widow. She will still owe us." He shoved the basket back into the woman's arms and walked away, barking at his men to follow. When they vanished into the crowd, the woman exhaled once, controlled, then knelt to pull her son into her arms. The boy's small fingers clutched her scarf as if it were the last rope over a cliff. Kemal watched her check the child's face for bruises with a tenderness that was almost fierce. When she stood again, she met Kemal's gaze. "You should not have done that," she said. "Men like that do not forget." "Neither do I," Kemal replied. Up close, he saw the faint cut at her lip, the shadow under her eyes from nights without sleep. "What is your name?" She hesitated, as if names were another kind of vulnerability. "Aylan," she said finally. "And my son is Yusuf." Yusuf peeked at Kemal from behind his mother's skirts, curious but cautious. Kemal inclined his head. "Your figs," he said, gesturing to the ones crushed in the dirt. "I will pay." Aylan's chin lifted. "I do not want pity." "Then consider it business," Kemal said, and placed coins in her palm. Enough to buy more figs, enough to buy a week of bread. Her fingers closed around the money slowly, as if weighing not its value, but its cost. "Business," she repeated, eyes narrowing. "You speak like a man used to having people obey him." Kemal felt the dangerous thrill of being seen. "And you speak like a woman used to being ignored," he said. "Yet you are not silent." Aylan's mouth tightened into something that was not quite a smile. "Silence does not feed children." Kemal should have left then. A sultan's curiosity could become a chain. But something in her refusal to bow, the way she held dignity even in rags, pulled him. "What did he mean," Kamal asked, "when he said you owed 3 months? For what?" Aylin's eyes flicked toward the alley, where the men had disappeared. "For my husband's death," she said quietly. "They call it debt. I call it punishment." She turned as if to go, but Kamal stepped with her. "Your husband died owing money?" Aylin's voice sharpened. "My husband died owing truth." Kamal felt Murad tense. "What truth?" Kamal pressed. Aylin stared at him for a long moment, then made a decision. "Come," she said. "If you truly want to know how this city bleeds, walk with me. But if you want stories to entertain yourself, stay in your fine shadows." She led them through narrow streets, past children with hollow cheeks and women boiling thin soup, past a line of men waiting outside a grain warehouse guarded by armed clerks. She stopped near a wall where old notices flapped, tax decrees, conscription orders, proclamations about loyalty. Aylin pointed at one. "See this? It says the Sultan reduced the grain levy." Kemal's stomach clenched. He had ordered that reduction weeks ago. "Yes," he said cautiously, "it should help." Aylin's laugh was bitter. "It helped the men who sell the receipts. The levy was reduced on paper. In the streets, they still take the same. They stamp a second fee, a service fee. They say it is for transport. There is no transport. The grain never reaches the poor quarter. It reaches the same warehouses that belong to the same friends." She glanced at him, daring him to deny it. Kemal's voice came out low. "How do you know?" Aylin's fingers tightened around Yusuf's hand. "Because my husband kept the accounts." Kemal's heart gave a single hard beat. "For whom?" "For the Treasury Office," she said, and when Kemal's eyes flickered, she nodded grimly. "Yes, the place with doors too thick for honest men." She swallowed, and for the first time, her strength showed a crack. He was not a hero. He was a clerk who believed numbers meant something. He found irregularities, payments to soldiers who did not exist, shipments recorded twice, customs fees that vanished between the dock and the ledger. He thought if he took evidence to his superior, it would be corrected. Her laugh came out like a cough. His superior was the irregularity. "What happened?" Kamal asked, though he already feared the answer. Aylin's eyes went far away. "They said he stole. They dragged him out at night. The next day they hung him in the square with a sign. Thief. They seized our home. Then they started collecting his debt from me because a widow is easier to squeeze than a dead man." Yusuf's grip tightened as if the child understood the weight of his mother's words. Kamal's hands curled beneath his cloak. The empire's rot had a smell and he was breathing it. "Did your husband leave any records?" Kamal asked softly. Aylin's gaze snapped back, suspicious. "Why?" "Because if what you say is true," Kamal said, choosing each word, "then the realm is not merely poor, it is being strangled, and I intend to cut the hands doing it." Aylin stared, and in her eyes, Kamal saw the same question Murad had asked him. "Are you brave or merely foolish?" "Men have said such things before," Aylin said. "They die." Kamal met her gaze without flinching. "Then perhaps it is time the dying change sides." That sentence should have been arrogance. In Kamal's mouth, it felt like confession. Aylin did not bow, but she did something more dangerous. She believed him just enough to risk a step. "I have records," she said, "hidden, not complete, but enough to make powerful men angry." Kamal nodded once. "Bring them to me." Aylin's lips parted, incredulous. "To you? Stranger, I do not even know your name." Kamal hesitated. In the crowd, any slip could be fatal. But the way she looked at him, unimpressed by money, unimpressed by threats, made him reckless. He leaned closer and murmured, "Kamal." Her eyes widened, not at the name alone, but at the weight behind it. Her face went pale. "No," she whispered. "That is—" "Yes," Kamal said. and Murad shifted to block anyone from reading their mouths. You have just spoken to the man whose proclamations flap on walls while thieves laugh in alleys. Aylin's breath caught. She looked at Yusuf, then back at Kemal. If you are truly him, she said, voice shaking with contained fury, then you should be ashamed. Kemal absorbed the blow. I am, he admitted. That is why I am here. Aylin's eyes burned. Then hear this, my sultan. Your palace is a lantern hung over a pit. The light is pretty. The pit is full of knives. Kemal felt something in his chest twist. Pain, admiration, desire, all braided. Show me the knives, he said. That was how the partnership began. Not with romance, but with truth. Kemal brought Aylin and Yusuf into a small safe house near the Spice District, a place Murad had used during border wars. There, by lamplight, Aylin unwrapped oilcloth and revealed a bundle of papers, smudged, crumpled, yet precious as jewels. Ledger fragments, receipts, names, dates, columns that did not align. Kemal's mind, trained in philosophy and statecraft, snapped into a new kind of focus as Aylin explained how the theft worked. They create ghosts, she said, tapping a page where soldiers' wages were listed. 1,000 men paid here who do not exist. The money goes to a commander. The commander shares it upward. If you investigate, the commander points to the ledger and says, the treasury ordered it. The treasury points to the barracks and says, the commander requested it. It becomes a circle. Circles are hard to break. Unless you cut through, Kemal murmured. Aylin's eyes flicked to him. If you cut, they bleed, she said, and then they will bleed you. Kemal studied the papers. One name appeared too often. Ferid Effendi, the treasurer. Another, Halim Pasha's cousin who controlled customs at the harbor. A third, a tax farm overseer who owned grain warehouses and oddly funded sermons about obedience. The pattern was clear. The empire's misery was not an accident, but a design. Money siphoned from the people into private vaults, then borrowed back from foreign lenders at cruel rates, binding the state into dependence while the council grew rich and the sultan grew weak. Kemal saw the trap in full now. Any reform he announced passed through hands that profited from sabotage. If he tried to audit the treasury openly, Ferid Effendi would warn the council that the sultan was unstable, and Halim Pasha would invoke the hidden heir as a stabilizing alternative. Kemal needed evidence so undeniable it could not be dismissed as paranoia. He needed allies in the army and among the judges. He needed, most dangerously, the people's trust. And Aylin, this widow from the poor quarter, this woman with bruises and a spine of steel, was an achado certero, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she offered him something he had never truly possessed, a bridge between palace and street. She knew which officials collected bribes, which docks hid unregistered cargo, which granaries were padlocked while children starved. She could read a lie in a receipt the way a hawk reads a tremor in grass. Kemal found himself seeking her counsel not just in secret meetings, but in the quiet moments between, when Yusuf fell asleep on a cushion and Aylin's face softened in the candlelight. He learned the small details of her suffering, the landlord who demanded payment in ways that made her skin crawl, the women in her building who whispered that a widow's refusal invited violence, the nights she stayed awake with a kitchen knife because men knocked on her door to collect debts invented on paper. He saw how she rationed kindness, a smile saved for Yusuf, a stern look saved for predators, a gentleness she did not spend easily. And in that economy of emotion, Kemal began to understand the empire itself. Some nights he returned to the palace and sat alone, still wearing the scent of the city, smoke, sweat, spice, and he would stare at his jeweled ring and feel it heavy as guilt. His desire for Aylin arrived not like a storm, but like a tide, steady, insistent, shaping his will without asking permission. It frightened him more than threats. A sultan could face daggers. How did a sultan face his own heart? Murad noticed first. She is dangerous, he warned, not unkindly. Not because she will betray you, because you will betray yourself for her. Kemal's reply was quiet. Then perhaps that is what I must do. Do not speak like a man in a poem, Murad grumbled. Speak like a sultan. Kemal looked at the map and said, a sultan who cannot love is already dead. He began to work, quietly at first. He ordered a routine review of grain distribution, placing a young judge, Selim Qadi, in charge, one of the few men in the court not tied to Halim Pasha. He promoted a captain from the provinces, Layla Hanım, unusual, controversial, but fiercely loyal, to oversee the harbor patrols. He sent Murad to the barracks with sealed orders to list actual soldiers by name and face. Each move was small enough to look harmless, yet together they formed a net. The council watched, wary, and responded with polite resistance, delays, missing paperwork, sudden illnesses among officials, rumors that Kemal planned to raise taxes to fund his vanity reforms. And then, as Aylin predicted, the knives came out. One afternoon in the market, a messenger approached Aylin with a letter sealed in black wax. She did not touch it at first. This is how they do it, she told Kemal later, voice tight. They send threats on paper so they can deny them aloud. Kemal broke the seal. Inside was a single sentence. Bring the child to the old aqueduct at midnight, or your son will be called a bastard, and your neck will be a rope. Kemal's blood went cold. They mean Yusuf, he said, anger rising. Aylin's eyes flashed. They mean something else too, she said quietly. Kemal looked up. What else? Aylin hesitated, and Kemal saw a war inside her. Fear against necessity. Yusuf slept in the corner, thumb in his mouth, unaware that empires could pivot on a child's breath. Aylin sank onto a cushion, hands clasped so hard her knuckles whitened. My sultan, she whispered, and for the first time she used his title not as accusation, but as acknowledgement. There is another child. Kemal's throat tightened. Where? Aylin swallowed. Close, she said. Closer than you think. Kemal waited, every instinct screaming that this was the hidden heir. Aylin's voice trembled. When my husband was alive, before he was arrested, he was assigned to reconcile the palace household expenses, wet nurses, midwives, the women's wing. He noticed payments for an infant that did not match the official records. The old sultan was dying then, and the palace was full of rumors. My husband asked questions. A midwife, frightened, told him something in secret. A prince had been born, but the council planned to secure the succession by removing the infant from the palace. They feared the mother's faction. They feared a civil war. So they decided to create ambiguity. Kemal's pulse thundered in his ears. They hid the child, he said. Aylin nodded, tears burning in her eyes. And they needed someone to carry the child out, unseen. Someone ordinary. Someone who could disappear into the city. Kemal's gaze snapped to Yusuf, sleeping peacefully. Understanding struck like lightning. No, he breathed. Aylin's voice broke. Yes, Yusuf is not. She squeezed her eyes shut. He is mine in every way that matters. I have raised him. I have bled for him. But he is also... She opened her eyes, and in them Kemal saw terror and devotion tangled together. He is the prince they buried alive in rumor. Kemal stared, mind racing. If this was true, then everything, the council's power, his own throne, was balanced on Yusuf's small shoulders. Do you have proof? Kemal asked hoarsely. Aylin reached into her bundle and pulled out a scrap of cloth, embroidered with a tiny emblem of the dynasty, something a palace infant might have. She also produced a ring, small enough for a child, bearing the old sultan's signet in miniature. My husband stole these, she whispered. Not for greed, for proof. He hoped to force the council to do the honorable thing, They killed him for it. Kemal's vision blurred with fury. They used a baby as a weapon, he said, voice shaking. They used you, Aylin's chin lifted through tears. And now they will use him again, she said. They know he lives. They are calling for the child at the aqueduct. They will either kill him and blame you, or seize him and parade him as the rightful heir. Kemal felt the palace walls around his mind. Protocol. Caution, the leash the council believed they held. Then he remembered Aylin's words. Lantern over a pit of knives. He stood. We will not go to the aqueduct, he said. Murad, who had been silent, swore under his breath. If they know about the boy, the city will ignite, Murad warned. Kemal's eyes hardened. Then we will control the flame, he said. That night, Kemal did something no compromised sultan was supposed to do. He chose a side. He took Aylin and Yusuf, not to the aqueduct, but through a hidden passage into the palace itself. The women's wing was vast, full of courtyards and tiled fountains, but Kemal led them to a small suite near his private library, a place only a handful of loyal servants knew. Aylin walked as if each step might be her last. If the council discovers this, she whispered, they will say you are harboring a rival. Kemal knelt in front of Yusuf, who blinked sleepily at the strange luxury around him. Listen to me, Kemal said gently, and Yusuf's small face brightened at the attention. Do you know what a father is? Yusuf frowned in thought, then said, a big man who comes home. Aylin's breath hitched. Kemal smiled sadly. Yes, he said, a father is a big man who comes home. And a father is also a man who stands between his child and the world's cruelty. He looked up at Aylin. I cannot bring your husband back. I cannot erase what they did to you. But I can stand between you and them. Aylin's eyes shimmered. Why? She whispered. Kemal's voice softened. Because when I saw you in the market, he admitted, I saw my empire's truth. And because when you looked at me, you did not see a crown. You saw a man who could choose. He hesitated, then spoke the thing that had been growing in him like a forbidden garden. And because I want you near me in a way that frightens me, Aylin's lips parted. She looked away as if the words were too bright. My sultan, she murmured, I am a widow with bruises and debts. I am a scandal. Kemal stepped closer. You are a remedy, he said. Aylin's laugh was a fragile sound. Remedies can be bitter. Then I will learn to drink bitterness, Kemal replied. The romance did not become easy. It became real. In stolen moments, Kemal would sit with Yusuf and teach him letters by tracing shapes in sand. Yusuf would giggle when Kemal mispronounced a childish rhyme. Aylin would watch, guarded at first, then slowly softening as she saw Kemal's patience, not the performance of a ruler, but the quiet attention of a man learning to be what he had never been allowed to imagine, a father. One evening, Yusuf fell asleep on Kemal's lap, while Aylin read a ledger fragment aloud. The lamplight painted Aylin's face in gold and shadow. Kemal reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, an intimate gesture so gentle it startled them both. Aylin's breath caught. She did not pull away. She whispered, If you touch me, my sultan, you must understand. There is no going back. Kemal's thumb rested on her cheekbone, careful as if she were made of glass and steel. I do not want to go back, he said. Their first kiss was not a conquest. It was an agreement, slow, trembling, full of the weight of what they risked. Aylin kissed him like a woman who had been denied softness and still refused to become hard. Kemal kissed her like a man who had been taught power and finally discovered devotion. They did not strip each other of dignity, they clothed each other in it. Yet even in that tenderness, the knives moved. The council noticed Kemal's increased secrecy. Halim Pasha began to press for public appearances, for a formal betrothal to a noblewoman from a powerful house. Farid Effendi offered to relieve Kemal of treasury worries, insisting that the Sultan's attention was better spent on foreign diplomacy. Rumors spread that Kemal had taken a common lover. In the city, pamphlets appeared accusing the Sultan of being bewitched by a widow. Someone carved the word traitor into the door of Aylin's old building. Then came the true strike, a scandal engineered with the precision of an accountant's knife. One morning, a servant found a box beneath Kemal's bed, filled with gold coins stamped with foreign markings and a seal of the treasury. The box also contained a bracelet, Aylin's bracelet, the only ornament she owned, a simple band her husband had once bought her when they still believed life could be kind. The accusation leapt from whispers to proclamations in a single day. The Sultan's secret woman had stolen from the treasury. She had seduced him to gain access. She was a spy. The divan convened in outrage, demanding justice to restore confidence. Ferid Effendi looked stricken, as if wounded by betrayal. Halim Pasha spoke of the people's fury and the army's unrest. Kemal listened, jaw clenched, as they performed shock like actors who had rehearsed. "Bring the woman," Halim Pasha declared. "Let her be questioned. Let the law show it is above all." Kemal's fingers tightened on the armrest of his throne. He understood the trap. If he defended Aylin openly, they would call him weak and compromised. If he surrendered her, they would destroy her and keep their theft hidden. Worse, if the scandal stuck, they would use it as justification to reveal Yusuf as the hidden heir, claiming Kemal had been harboring him for treason. And then the factions would explode. Civil war, served on a platter of righteous outrage. Kemal rose from the throne. His voice filled the hall like a drawn blade. "You speak of law," he said, eyes on Halim Pasha, "as if you have not used it as a whip. You speak of restoring confidence while you drain the people's veins. I will not offer a woman to wolves to soothe your appetites." Gasps rippled. Ferid Effendi's eyes widened, then narrowed. "My Sultan," he said softly, "do you deny the evidence?" Kemal turned to him. "I deny your theater," Kemal replied, "and I announce this. The treasury will be audited by a court of accounts appointed by me, not by the divan. Any official who interferes will be tried for treason." Halim Pasha's face became very still. "You cannot," he said quietly. "The divan can." Kemal interrupted, and the single word cracked the chamber's illusion. He signaled Murad. Murad stepped forward with janissaries, men loyal to Kemal because Murad had chosen them carefully. Men whose pay Kemal had ensured arrived in honest coin. The sight of armed loyalty shifted the air. Halim Pasha realized too late that Kemal had been building a net while the council sharpened their knives. But the council still had their last weapon, legitimacy. Halim Pasha's voice lowered. "If you force this, my Sultan," he warned, "others will force something else. You know what I mean." Kemal's gaze did not flicker. "Yes," he said, "I know." And then he did something that stunned even Murad. He leaned forward and spoke as if he were speaking not only to the divan, but to the empire itself. "The realm is sick," Kemal declared. "Not because the people are poor, but because the powerful have grown fat on their suffering. I will purge the rot, even if it crawls through gilded halls." Halim Pasha's lips tightened. "Then we will see," he said. That night, the knives became hands. A group of masked men infiltrated the palace through a servant corridor, helped, Kemal knew, by someone inside. They did not come for Kemal first. They came for Yusuf. In the child's suite, Aylin woke to a whisper of footsteps. She grabbed a lamp and saw a shadow near the bed. She did not scream. She lunged. The attacker struck her across the face. The lamp shattered, plunging the room into darkness lit only by moon. Yusuf cried out. Aylin threw herself over him. She felt a blade graze her shoulder. Then Murad crashed in with guards, steel flashing. The masked men fled, but one was caught. Under interrogation, he confessed with sobs. He had been paid by a man connected to the treasury to seize the prince child and deliver him to an estate outside the city. The plan, the man admitted, was to present the child at a public prayer gathering, declare him the rightful heir, and call on the army to restore the true bloodline. Kemal's hands shook as he listened. not from fear for his throne, but from the image of Yusuf dragged into a crowd as a banner. Aylan, pale and bleeding, sat rigid beside him. "They will not stop," she whispered. Kemal looked at her bruised cheek, at the blood seeping through her sleeve, and something inside him settled. He had tried caution. Caution had invited violence. He kissed her forehead, a gesture so intimate it made Murad look away. "Then we will stop them," Kemal said. The next morning, Kemal summoned Selim Kadi and Layla Hanım and revealed everything: the ledger fragments, the pattern of theft, the attempt on Yusuf, the ring and cloth. He did not hide the truth because secrecy was the council's weapon. He turned truth into his own. Selim Kadi's face went grim. "If this is brought to the public," he warned, "the city could erupt." Layla Hanım's eyes were fierce. "Or it could unite," she countered. "People follow strength, not titles." Kemal asked Selim Kadi, "Can you prove the theft?" Selim nodded slowly. "With these fragments and with access to treasury records? Yes. But access will be resisted." Kemal looked at Layla. "Can you secure the harbor and the barracks?" Layla smiled, like a woman who enjoyed difficult tasks. "Give me authority and honest pay," she said, "and I will make the sea itself obey." Kemal gave them both what they needed. He also made a decision that would either save the empire or shatter it. He would reveal Yusuf, not as a rival, but as a future. He would not allow factions to wield the child against him. He would claim the child as his own, not by blood perhaps, but by choice, the kind of legitimacy the people understood. On the day of the public court session, the palace courtyard filled with officials, soldiers, merchants, and, because rumors had spread, ordinary citizens pressed behind gates. Halim Pasha arrived with the full pomp of the divan, eyes sharp, mouth composed. Ferid Effendi came with ledgers and a wounded expression, playing the faithful servant betrayed. Aylan stood beside Kemal, dressed not in palace finery but in a simple, dark gown, her bruises visible. Murmurs rose at the sight of her: the widow, the witch, the fief. Kemal raised his hand for silence. "You have heard lies," he said, voice carrying. "Today, you will hear numbers." Selim Kadi stepped forward and laid out the evidence: ghost soldiers, duplicate shipments, customs fees diverted, grain withheld. Witnesses were called: dock workers who had seen bribes, a clerk who had been forced to stamp false receipts, a soldier who had never received his pay. The crowd's murmurs shifted from gossip to anger. Ferid Effendi protested, but his words sounded thin against details. Halim Pasha attempted to redirect, speaking of state stability, of foreign threats. Kemal let him speak, then answered with a truth like thunder. "You speak of stability," Kemal said, "yet you have kept a dagger hidden behind your back. You have threatened me with a child." Gasps. Halim Pasha's eyes hardened. "Be careful, my sultan," he warned. Kemal gestured, and Murad brought Yusuf forward. The boy walked solemnly, holding Aylin's hand. His eyes were wide at the crowd, but he did not cry. He had learned, too young, that tears fed wolves. Kemal knelt beside him so all could see. "This child," Kemal announced, "has been used as rumor and weapon. I will end that. He will not be a banner for rebellion. He will be a promise for peace." Halim Pasha's voice rose sharply. "You cannot claim him. The bloodline." "The bloodline," Kemal interrupted, standing, "is not only blood. It is duty. It is protection. It is the willingness to sacrifice comfort for the realm." He looked at the crowd. "If Yusuf is of the old sultan's blood, then the council's theft is not only financial, it is treason against the dynasty. If Yusuf is not, then the council's rumor is still treason, because they'd have used the idea of an heir to hold the empire hostage. Either way, the crime is theirs." He placed his hand on Yusuf's head, gentle and firm. "I will adopt him publicly as my son," Kemal declared. "I will raise him as a prince, and I will marry Aylan, who has raised him through hell and has shown more integrity then a room full of jeweled men. A shockwave ran through the courtyard. Some shouted approval, some shouted outrage. Halim Pasha's face twisted, not in indignation, but in fear, because Kemal had stolen the council's last lever. Aylin swayed as if struck. She stared at Kemal, eyes shining with panic and awe. "You will be hated," she whispered. Kemal's voice softened. "Meant only for her. Let them hate," he murmured. "I will be loved by the ones who matter." Then he faced the divan and spoke the sentence that sealed their fate. "Halim Pasha," he said, "Ferid Effendi, you are under arrest for embezzlement, conspiracy, and attempted kidnapping of a child of the realm." Halim Pasha's mouth opened, but Layla Hanim's soldiers stepped forward, and the sound of boots answered more than words. Ferid Effendi tried to flee. Murad seized him. In the chaos, one of Halim's supporters drew a knife and lunged, not at Kemal, but at Aylin. Aylin saw it coming. She shoved Yusuf behind her and took the blow in her shoulder. Kemal moved faster than thought, intercepting the attacker and slamming him to the ground. The crowd roared. In that roar, the empire chose. It did not choose because all were noble or wise. It chose because people had been starving, and they had finally seen a ruler bleed for something other than pride. The days that followed were dangerous. Halim Pasha's faction tried to incite the barracks, but Murad had already replaced key paymasters. Ferid Effendi's allies tried to smuggle gold out of the city, but Layla's patrols seized the ships. There were riots, some for the old order, some against it. But Kemal responded not with indiscriminate cruelty, but with targeted justice. He convened public trials. He returned stolen grain to the poorest quarters. He abolished the worst tax farms and replaced them with direct collection overseen by judges, not thugs. Foreign lenders threatened sanctions. Kemal renegotiated by offering trade concessions that benefited the state rather than private pockets, making it clear that any foreign attempt to fund rebellion would be met with closed ports. The council's remaining members attempted one final play. They spread a proclamation declaring Yusuf the rightful sultan and Kemal an usurper. Kemal responded by holding Yusuf up on the palace balcony, not as a rival, but as a child held by his father. "No one will die for this boy," Kemal shouted to the crowd, "because I will not allow him to be used as an excuse for ambition. If you love the dynasty, then love the people who carry it. And if you hate me, then hate me with your words, not with your swords." Something shifted in the city then, a slow turning like a ship changing course. People began to repeat a new rumor. The Sultan walked among them. The Sultan listened. The Sultan married a widow who had suffered their suffering. The Sultan raised a child as his own. It was not a fairy tale. It was a political earthquake. Aylin's position remained precarious. Noblewomen sneered. Courtiers called her a thief in silk. Priests debated whether her marriage was a blessing or a scandal. Aylin endured it with the same steel she had carried in the poor quarter, but now the stakes were higher. One night, she stood in Kemal's private garden, staring at the moonlit fountain. "I did not want to be your weakness," she said softly. Kemal came behind her, wrapping a cloak around her shoulders. "You are not my weakness," he said. "You are my reason to be strong." Aylin turned, eyes wet. "They will try again," she whispered. "They will try to take him." Kemal touched her cheek where the bruise had faded. "Then they will find the empire standing in front of him," he said. The most dangerous moment came weeks later, when a provincial bey declared rebellion, claiming to restore the true heir. He marched toward the capital with hired soldiers and banners bearing the old sultan's emblem. Civil war threatened to burst into flame. Kemal did not hide behind palace walls. He rode out with Murad and Layla, leaving Aylin in the palace with Yusuf and loyal guards. Before he left, he knelt in front of Yusuf. "Be brave," he told the child. Yusuf's small hand reached up and touched Kemal's face. "Will you come home?" Yusuf asked, repeating his definition of fatherhood. Kemal swallowed hard. "Yes," he promised, "because fathers come home." Aylin watched him mount his horse. Her voice trembled. "If you die, Kemal leaned down, forehead to hers for a heartbeat. "If I die," he murmured, "then remember, you did not save me from ruin. You taught me how to save myself." He rode out, and the city held its breath. On the battlefield outside the capital, Kemal did not win by sheer force. He won by turning the rebels' lie against him. He had intercepted letters proving the Bey had accepted foreign gold and planned to sell coastal forts in exchange. Selim Kadi had prepared the documents. Layla had seized the courier. Kemal sent a herald to the rebel camp with a choice: surrender and face trial, or be publicly exposed as a traitor who used the child's name to disguise greed. The rebel laughed until Kemal ordered the letters read aloud in front of both armies. Soldiers shifted, murmurs spreading like fire through dry grass. Men do not love being used as pawns. The rebels' own captains began to doubt. When Kemal then offered amnesty to any soldier who laid down arms, the rebels' army cracked. It did not explode into slaughter. It dissolved. The Bey tried to flee. Murad caught him. The rebellion died not with a massacre, but with a humiliation. A false savior unmasked as a merchant of treason. The threat of civil war receded, not because all danger vanished, but because the most effective spark had been dampened: the weaponization of Yusuf. Kemal returned to the palace exhausted, dust-stained, alive. Aylan met him at the gate with Yusuf in her arms. Yusuf wriggled down and ran to Kemal, colliding with his legs. Kemal lifted the boy and held him so tightly the child squeaked, then laughed. Aylan's tears fell freely. Kemal looked at her and saw, for the first time since the old sultan's death, a future not made entirely of traps. "You came home," Yusuf said proudly, as if Kemal's survival was proof of a rule in the universe. Kemal kissed the child's forehead. "Yes," he whispered. Then he looked at Aylan. "So did I," he said, meaning more than one thing. In the months that followed, the reforms began to bite deep enough to hurt. Hurt the ones who had fed on the empire. There were assassination attempts, quiet and persistent, but Kemal's guard tightened. There were bribes offered, lavish and tempting. But Kemal had already tasted a different wealth. The sound of children laughing in a street where bread had returned. The sight of a soldier paid honestly who no longer needed to steal. The feel of Aylan's hand in his at night when the palace finally went silent. Aylan became more than the Sultan's wife. She became his advisor, unofficial, controversial, but effective. She helped build a court of accounts that could audit provincial officials. She insisted on publishing grain distribution schedules publicly so thieves could not hide behind paperwork. She persuaded Kemal to establish a fund for widows of executed thieves, knowing many had been scapegoats like her husband. When nobles mocked her as a commoner, she looked them in the eye and said, "Common is what you have made of decency." Some hated her for that. Others respected her, unwillingly. Kemal's love for her deepened not in grand gestures, but in the daily collision of their wills. Arguments about mercy versus fear, about how much to reveal and when. One night, after a particularly brutal debate in the divan, Kemal returned to their chambers and found Aylan reading to Yusuf. The boy's head rested against her shoulder. Aylan looked up, and Kemal saw exhaustion in her face. "Are we winning?" she asked quietly. Kemal sat beside her and took her hand. "We are surviving," he said, "and that may be the first victory." Aylan's thumb traced the scar on his knuckle. "I never wanted a crown," she murmured. Kemal smiled faintly. "Neither did I," he admitted. "But I want you." Aylan's eyes softened. "Then keep choosing," she whispered. The final twist arrived not as betrayal, but as truth. Selim Kadi discovered, buried in old palace correspondence, the most damning detail. The council had not merely hidden Yusuf. They had planned from the beginning to keep Kemal as a placeholder until the right moment to unveil the child and control the empire under a regency. Kemal had been chosen, not because he was worthy, but because he was expected to be pliable. Kemal stared at the letters for a long time, then laughed once, coldly. Aylin watched him. "Does it hurt?" she asked. Kemal closed the file. "It would have," he said, "if I were still the man they chose." He looked at Yusuf playing with wooden soldiers on the carpet. "They wanted a puppet," he said. "They gave me a child. They gave me you. They created my rebellion." Aylin's mouth trembled into a smile. "Then let the empire be your revenge," she said softly. Kemal pulled her close and kissed her, not like the first kiss, uncertain, but like a vow renewed. "Not revenge," he corrected. "Redemption." On the anniversary of his reign, Kemal stood in the palace courtyard again. The divan was smaller now, purged of the worst rot. The treasury was still strained, the empire still scarred. But grain flowed, soldiers were paid, and foreign envoys spoke to Kemal with a caution that bordered on respect. Aylin stood beside him. Yusuf stood between them in ceremonial clothes, squinting at the sun. Kemal addressed the crowd. "A realm does not collapse in a day," he said, "and it does not rise in a day. But it rises when we stop pretending the poor are invisible and the corrupt are inevitable." He placed his hand on Yusuf's shoulder. "This boy is not your weapon," he declared, voice ringing. "He is your future." The people cheered, not because they suddenly loved monarchy, not because they forgot hunger, but because they saw at last a ruler who had stepped off the dais and into the dust, and had brought back not contempt, but commitment. That night in their chambers, Aylin sat by the window, listening to distant celebrations. Kemal joined her, quieter than he had ever been on the throne. "Do you regret it?" he asked, surprising her. Aylin turned. "Regret what?" "Choosing me," Kemal said. "Choosing this life." Aylin studied him. The Sultan's face in private looked less like marble and more like flesh. Tired, human, capable of doubt. She reached for his hand. "I did not choose the throne," she said gently. "I chose the man who stepped between my child and cruelty at a fountain." Kemal's throat tightened. Aylin continued, voice low, "And I chose the father who came home." Kemal's eyes closed for a heartbeat, as if he were holding back something too large. When he opened them, they shone. He kissed her palm. "Then I will keep coming home," he vowed, "until the empire itself feels like a home for the ones who have never been safe." Aylin leaned into him, and for a moment, the palace did not feel like a cage or a stage. It felt like a shelter built in the middle of a storm. Outside, the city still carried scars, and enemies still watched, and the idea of the hidden heir still haunted corners of politics. But the heir was no longer hidden, and no longer a spark for war. He was a child with a bedtime story, a father who practiced letters with him, and a mother who refused to be broken. The empire, for the first time in years, began to breathe, not because fate was kind, but because love had become strategy, and strategy had become mercy. And a sultan, who had been chosen as a compromise, had chosen instead to be a pillar.